Good evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll get things started. My name is Stacy Henderson. I am the City Secretary and Director of Administrative Services for Farmers Branch, and welcome to the Dallas Central Appraisal District Workshop on the reappraisal process. So first, I would like to welcome and thank Councilwoman Tina Bennett-Burton. She's back here in the audience, and Mayor Terry Lynn for being here tonight. And we have our Chief Appraiser, Shane Doherty, here, that's going to lead the discussion tonight, introduce his staff as well. So we'll get you started.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Shane Doherty. I'm with the Dallas Central Appraisal District. I'm the Chief Appraiser. I was appointed by our Board of Directors about a year and a half ago. I've been with the agency for just almost 40 years now. So been in all the different appraisal divisions, and so I'm very familiar with the appraisal process. And anyways, I want to introduce my staff here too. I got Cheryl Jordan. She's been with the agency for 38 years. She's our Deputy Chief Appraiser. Also has been the Community Relations Officer for 37 plus years, working with the taxing jurisdictions and the property owners and doing a lot of community outreach, town hall meetings and these type of programs. And I have Patricia Nixon. Cheryl became Deputy Chief Appraiser when I became Chief. And now Patricia Nixon, she's our Director of Community Relations Services. She's been with us for 37 years as well. She's been in the residential division, the commercial division, the business personal property division. She's also was the manager of the property records exemption divisions over deeds and exemptions and the other things that we do within that property records division. So she's now the person that does a lot of the community outreach. And I know I think a week or two ago, we came here and talked about with John Ames, the tax assessor collector. It's called Property Tax 101. I've done 10, 15, 20 of them with him over the years. Talk about the whole tax calendar. You know, our piece of the calendar is we're responsible, the Dallas Appraisal District. We were created by legislation in 1981, basically when we came into existence. Prior to, it was in the Pivotal bill that was passed in 1970, created the appraisal district. So we're a political subdivision of the state. Really our oversight agency is the Comptroller's Office. Within the Comptroller's Office, there's a division called the Property Tax Assistance Division. And we're basically follow the Texas Property Tax Code. And our mission is really to do one thing. It's to establish the fair market value of all properties within a county, appraisal districts, in our case, Dallas County. And simply define what is fair market value, what you can sell your property for in its current condition as of an assessment date. Our assessment date's January 1 of every year. We're establishing fair market value as of January 1 of every year. And basically, that's our mission. We also are required to make sure our records are correct with regard to the ownership. We work all the deeds that are filed with the Dallas County Clerk's Office, and then we're required to make sure we have a good homeowner, a good owner name, a good mailing address, and then we also administer all the exemptions. The homesteads, the general homesteads, the over 65s, the disabilities, disabled vets, charitables, total exemptions. And then what we do is we create an appraisal roll, and we provide that appraisal roll by July 25th of every year to the 63 taxing jurisdictions within Dallas County. They're technically our client. They fund us based on their percent of the levy that's brought in Dallas County. Actually, there's $9.2 billion worth of property tax revenue that comes into the cities. There's 31 cities in Dallas County. There's 16 school districts in Dallas County. There's the county itself. There's Parkland Hospital, Dallas Community College, and then there's the special districts. And those are the 63 taxing jurisdictions that we provide the appraisal roll. Who owns it? Apply any applicable exemptions and establish that fair market value, apply an exemption, and create what we call a taxable value or assessed value. And then when we provide that roll to the taxing jurisdictions, they'll go out and set their tax rates, right? And then they'll to fund their budgets, and then they provide that information to the Dallas County Assessor Collector John Ames, and he goes out and sends out tax bills in October with the delinquent state owner before January 31st of every year. So we don't set rates, we don't collect taxes. All we do is say what it's worth as of January 1 in its current condition. And to kind of give you an idea, we're mass appraisers. Most people, when they buy a home, you have a fee appraiser come into your home and establish what the fair market value if you're going to get a loan. We're arriving at the same value, fair market value, what you can sell the property for in its current condition. Their assessment date may be the date you're buying it or some other date. Our assessment date's always January 1. But the difference that from us and the fee appraiser and they're registered with the Texas Real Estate Commission, TLACB, but we're model builders. We build models. We're mass appraisers. Fee appraisers do it for banking purposes, fee appraisers. So we're developing predictive models, okay? And here's how we do that. And we look in the residential, I'm gonna speak specifically to residential tonight. I have brought some brochures for everybody. I'll talk a little bit those later about commercial and business personal property, but this is about the residential reappraisal process. So what we do in Dallas County, there's 650,000 residential properties, all right? And we have 28 different building classifications, which is, what's a building class? It's the architectural style of the house, okay? And then what we do, and we have neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are a defined area. It's a subdivision, typically. The average neighborhood's 250, 300 homes. It's a subdivision. It can be as small as 4 homes. It could be a small townhome complex. It could be a condo. It could be as large as 2,000. But when we define a neighborhood, it's a defined area where we think homes within that area compete for each other for resale purposes, okay? And within that area, it's usually always within, we build these neighborhood codes within the school district, because most people buy homes based a lot of what the schools they want to be in. And so we have over 5,000 neighborhoods. Of these 650,000 properties that are in a residential file, we have approximately just over 5,000 neighborhoods. It's a defined area, and we have 28 different building classifications. And so the models that we build, the mass appraisal models that we build, and we're building them by neighborhood, by building class, okay? Some neighborhoods, a lot of suburban cities now have just one building class, semi-custom home. I live in Carrollton. It's one neighborhood. It's all the same homes, same builder, 220 homes. But there are other neighborhoods, original towns, Farmers Branch, Carrollton, different parts of town, Dallas, M Streets. You may have 6 different building classifications, architectural styles. In a lot of neighborhoods now where we're seeing gentrification, where homes are being torn down and new homes are being built, you'll see 2 different neighborhoods. You'll see 2 different building classes, the new custom homes and the old maybe ranch style homes or the tract homes. But we're building models by neighborhood, by building class, okay? And when you look at the size of our file, the 5,000 neighborhoods, the 28 different building classifications, we actually maintain over 14,000 models that we're developing and every year. And what we do every year, 3 times a year in the residential department, we look within that neighborhood what homes are selling for versus what we're appraising them at, okay? And if we're not appraising the homes between 95 and 103% of what they're selling for, we're going to target that neighborhood for reappraisal. Our goal is to be at market value, what you can sell your home for. So what we do every year, we'll do a ratio study in October to see what our level of assessment is by neighborhood, by building class, and we'll do it again in January. And then we do one towards the end of our reappraisal effort, which ends in the end of March. And we make sure that we're appraising a property as of January 1 at fair market value. We want to have an assessment ratio of 100%. Assessment ratio is the appraised value divided by the sale price. So what we do is we're going to look at this sales information, and hypothetically, if we're appraising homes for $200,000, let me use it hypothetically. I'm going to use it that not many homes are selling for $100,000 anymore. But hypothetically, in a neighborhood, if we're appraising homes at $100,000 within that building class range, but they're selling for $110,000, we're going to develop a model, and we're going to tweak that model from 1.0 to 1.1, and we're going to apply that model to both the sold and unsold homes. We're looking at what's sold, and basically we're going to raise that model by 10%, apply that factor to the sold and unsold homes to predict, we're trying to predict what the unsold homes will sell for based on what the homes sold for that have sold. But it's done by neighborhood, by building class. I know a lot of folks think we're using different class of homes to appraise other classes' home. No, it's very specific. It's the specific class within that neighborhood is what we're trying to estimate what you can sell your home for within that class based on what's sold. And there's got to be sufficient information, so it's not just typically one sale. There's some areas that you don't have a lot of sales, and we may decide to go to a competing neighborhood. Typically, it's going to be in the same school district. It's going to be of like homes, of same class, and we may extract information that they're selling for $100 a foot. These were over here appraised at $80, but we don't have limited sales. We may go over to this neighborhood and say, well, we think based on these sales, they're going to sell for $100 a foot. And there's economic theories of this, but we're mass appraisers. We're model builders. And what we're trying to do is predict what you can sell your home for. And what I like to tell everybody, we're not right. all the time, right? If your house is like what's selling in the neighborhood, we should have an accurate estimate. Now in mass appraisal, what I'll say is, 80%, in Dallas County is very homogeneous where properties are like each other, but in neighborhoods that are older, you have homes that are updated and homes that aren't updated, right? And you have some homes that are well maintained, but not necessarily updated. So the fact is what you have to ask yourself, and this is where you should always pursue the valuation that we send out in the mail. We'll be mailing out over 600,000 appraisal notices on Monday. Should be in everybody's mailbox by the end of next week with the protest deadline of May 15th. But what we're trying to do is we're going to use those sales information, again, to estimate what we think your house can sell for. If your house is like what's selling in a neighborhood, it should be a pretty accurate estimate of value. Now, with that said, we're not always perfect. I'd say about 80%, we're probably accurate. There's 20% of the properties that we may be off. And on those 20%, half of those, we maybe think the property's in better shape than it is, and we may be overappraising it. And there may be some properties there that we're unaware that it's been updated or remodeled, we may be undervaluing them, right? So what you have to ask yourself is, hey, when you get that appraisal notice, is this an accurate estimate of value? And is my house like what's selling? Now, the minute you file your protest, we're going to ask you to file your protest, to submit your documentation with your protest, your evidence, and your opinion of value. And right now what we do is when you file your protest and we flag it, that next day we're going to send out to the website, provide you all the evidence that we have concerning the valuation of your property and the sales within your neighborhood that we're using. We're going to provide you that. We're going to provide you the information, the physical attribute information we have on your property, the age, the desirability code. We have 8 desirability codes. Excellent, very good, good, average, fair, poor, very poor, undesirable. So, and that allows us to address the properties that have been updated versus the ones that haven't been updated. But we're going to provide you that sales information. And the thing I always like to tell everybody too, in these town hall meetings, what y'all should do between January 1 and April 1 of every year, again, we're going to mail out over, I think it's 700,000 notices on Monday. And we're going to provide you appraisal notice, the estimate of value, last year's value, give you a protest form, provide you information. I brought the insert that will be in those appraisal notices. We want you to be proactive. If you're not sure, file a protest. Then go look at the evidence that we've put out there. But I like to tell everybody what you should do between January 1 and April is be proactive and seek out a broker who's actively selling homes in your neighborhood. A realtor, okay? Not your brother-in-law is a realtor, not your sister-in-law is a realtor. Someone who's actively selling in your neighborhood, and ask them to give you a market analysis or broker's opinion of value, what they think a realistic sales price you can sell your house for in its current condition. Not a list price, not if you fix it up. What's a realistic sales price for my house in its current condition? They'll do it for free. These are brokers. No one should charge you. They want to do it. You may not want to sell your house, but you just want an estimate of value. They'll do it because down the road, they're going to think, hey, maybe you'll use them as their listing broker when you do decide to sell your house. But that's very good information to get. So when you get your appraisal notices, right, you have something to compare it to. And the same sales that they're using to do that analysis, we're using as well. So it's just some things out there that you need to know. Now, the reason I'm here, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago with John Ames, and I know there's some things going on in the community here in Farmers Branch about trying to encourage people to remodel or build new homes. And one of the things that we are required to do, and I wish we didn't, but we have to do it, I wish we could just send you one value. Here's what we think you can sell your home for. But the tax code tells us that we have to establish a land value and an improvement value. And improvement value is just the structures that reside on your property. We call it improvement. It's a structure value. So when we build a model, right, and we look at the total value of what properties are selling for. And then we have to do what we call a highest and best use analysis of the land. What is legally permissible, what the zoning allows to be there. And we want to establish, when we build this model, the fair market value of the land, what it's selling for, if we have sales information. And so when we have properties that are selling and they're tearing the homes down, and there's numbers of those, we're going to look at those sales of those homes that were bought and tore down, and that's going to start the basis of our land value. So if we're in a neighborhood and we're appraising homes for, let's just say hypothetically $500,000, and they're selling for $500,000, and we have the land on for $200,000, and the land and the improvements are going to be on for $300,000. But suddenly, all of a sudden, we're getting land sales, and people are paying $500,000 and tearing these properties down. We're going to establish a land value of $500,000, And what's going to happen in that homes that are like being torn down, we're going to have a very nominal value on the improvement values. Because our feeling is that the next person who buys that property, they're not going to pay $600,000 for it. They're going to pay $500,000 like the builders are paying. And that's what we're going to have a very nominal value on the improvement. So we're going to try to establish the fair market value of the land and create a model. So if the selling for $500,000 and the land's for $300,000, we're going to have the structures on or the improvements for $200,000. If land's selling for $400,000, but the homes are still selling at $500,000, we're going to have the improvements on for $100,000. The improvements become an allocated value of the total market based on us establishing the fair market value of the land. And that's what happens. I know here there's some things in the community that we're unaware of that just came to our light, but a lot of times when you have tear downs, there's going to be a nominal value on those homes that are like what's being torn down. And we're going to use those tear downs. Actually, the land value, it's not only the cost of what they're paying for the property tear down, it's also considered in that land value is the demolition cost, it's the site development cost. That's called the site improvements to the site. That's really all in the appraisal methodology. That's all associated with the land value of that account. And we're seeing a lot of gentrification across the county where homes are being torn down and new homes are being built. But we still don't want to overappraise the homes that are going to be torn down. We don't want to put them on for $700,000 because they're only going to sell for $500,000. And now within that iteration, there are some that are updated, there are some that aren't. And that's where you have to, if you feel that the information we have is misinformation, that's where you want to pursue the property value and file a timely protest. You know, what's going to go out now is we're going to send these notices out, our proposed value. I will say this, values are flattened out. I mean, I think you all see it now. You know, for years, you didn't see for sale signs, right? People are bidding up properties. Properties are selling 24 hours, bidding up. The last year, we're not doing as much reappraisal this year because the price points have flattened out. Homes are selling for about the same, this is generally speaking across the county, for about the same price per square foot they were a year ago. So when we're doing our ratio analysis, right, looking at what homes are selling for, compared to what we're appraising them at, we're appraising them at what they're selling for. So we're not doing a lot of reappraisal this year, not as much as we had the 4 prior years. And the other thing that we do every year is we work all building permits that are issued at the 31 cities. Anything that's a building permit that's issued, we would pick them up once a month or we receive them electronically. And if we think that building permit is going to change some conditional aspect of the home or some physical attribute of the home, we're going to go out and inspect that property. And we're going to look at what's been done as of January 1 of every year on that property. If it's under construction, we're going to note what % complete it is, and then we'll come back out the next year and see what the finished work is. So there's 2 things in our reappraisal effort that go on. It's the permitting process, where we're going to look at when those properties are having physical attribute changes. We'll do that between August and January 1 of every year, because that's as of the assessment date. And then we finish that reappraisal process of developing those models based on what homes are selling for within that class, within that neighborhood. And that's what it is. And when you all do file a protest, when we provide you that data, we're going to go from really model builders to becoming more like a fee appraiser. We have some sophisticated software where we're going to load what we hope have 3 good sales comparables. Then we're going to adjust for differences between your property and those comps. Bathroom count, you know, could be a size adjustment, could be a condition adjustment, could be a pool adjustment, could be a lot size adjustment. And we're going to take a more of a micro look when you file your appeal. And if the value is wrong, we're going to correct it. In fact, I stood up this past Wednesday with our staff of 110 appraisers, and I told them specifically, I've done this for 20 years now. The value that we put in the mail is not the value we're to defend. Once an owner files a protest, we're going to take them down another path, and we're going to look at the evidence that they're providing. We're going to look at the evidence that we have, and we're going to, if their value is wrong, we're going to fix it. And that's what we do. We're not here, and because we're going to take a micro look at it. We're model builders, and we're going to build a model that's equitable, so we're treating the unsolds like the solds, because actually equity supersedes market value in Texas. You have a right to file market value or an unequal appraisal. Unequal says you go find a reasonable sample of comparable properties, adjust for differences, size, pools, age, condition, bath counts, and adjust for differences. And we're required to appraise at the median value of those properties. But that supersedes market. But when we develop those models and we notify you, we're going to have an equitable value. We'll be able to justify, wow, you're on for this price per square foot and someone else is this price per square foot. We're going to typically look at your building class within your neighborhood to do that analysis. So When you get that information in it and you have a PIN number on your appraisal notice, you'll get a PIN number on your hearing notice, and you can go out. It's called a 41461. 41461 refers to the Texas Property Tax Code, and it requires us. We're required the preponderance of evidence is of we have to prove the proof is on us to establish the market value in these hearings. Now, in our informal process, what we ask, if you file a protest and submit documentation, right, and an opinion of value, we're going to reach out to you at least 3 days before your hearing through a phone call or through an email exchange. If you use our U-File online system, it'll be an email exchange. And we're going to have an informal review. We're going to look at your evidence. We're going to look at ours. And if we can come to some common understanding, then we agree to a value adjustment and you agree to it, then there's no need for your formal hearing. If you don't agree with the appraiser, then you have a right to go in front of the Appraisal Review Board. They're citizens. There are 120 of them appointed by our board of directors, and they're just citizens. They're like jurors. They're not experts. They're not experts. They just listen to the evidence, and they're going to make a determination. Now, most people who come through the informal review process, I'd say 60% that engage, we're going to probably come to some informal settlement, and not to negate the need for a formal hearing. But that's the process. I see a hand up. Did you? Yeah, and that, so, yeah. Okay.
So on the subject of land value.
Yes.
This was a big deal in Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
the city of Dallas, maybe 6 months, 9 months ago.
Right.
At least since the pandemic.
Sure.
Where homeowners
Uh-huh.
were selling these oversized lots
Uh-huh.
for a specific number.
Right.
And then the developer was coming in and planting 4 condos of,
Right.
let's say,
Okay.
on that. So how does that situation impact the other homeowners in that residential area? Does it overinflate their property value because of what this landowner has done? Because the new property is going to
Right.
go for a lot more money.
Right.
Because it has 4 residences on
Sure.
it. And what can citizens do to keep that from happening here
Okay.
in Carrollton?
Okay.
In Farmers Branch
Right.
specifically?
Well, that's a good question, and I like to just reinforce what we say. We're looking at what's happening in your neighborhood. So basically, and we're looking at the land sales within your neighborhood. So this area that's over here and in the specific area, and they're buying those homes and tearing them down and building a townhome, right? We're going to value those townhomes at what we believe they're selling for as new townhomes. We're going to establish a land value, likely what that builder bought those properties and tore them down for. But that's specific to that neighborhood, okay? We're going to build models by neighborhood, by building class, okay? So I'm going to say that's not going to influence how we're going to value property in your neighborhood a mile or 2 miles away. Now, let's just say there's a pocket of homes here, and there's another neighborhood right next, and they're very comparable. It could potentially affect the next one. But we're not going to look at the townhomes to value a home that's 30 years old. We're only going to look at that class, which that's that new year built, that architectural style, to value those properties. And we're not going to use those price per square foot and try to project what your property would sell for a price, because they're just different properties. They're different classifications. So like I said, by building, we have 14,400 models. That's how specific we are. We're looking at your neighborhood and your building class. But there are neighborhoods here, like you go up, Marsh Lane or Josie, you can see some neighborhoods on the left or on one blocks are like the other ones, and they may be separate neighborhoods, but I see there's teardowns going in both neighborhoods, and we're going to still build models within those neighborhoods and look at what homes are selling for and what are being torn down, and that's going to become a base of our land value. But it's not going to be just one. It should be, we need more than just one. And we're going to see anomalies, okay? And this is what happens too. When we build our land values, okay, let's say you get someone pays $375, someone pays $400, someone pays $425, someone pays $385. We're probably going to build our land value at $375. We're going to have a range, but we're probably going to be at the lower end of the range. Why? Because if we put them at $450, right, y'all are all going to come in and show us the $375. The one sold for $375. The one sold $385. So we're going to typically have a range. The lane's going to be at the lower end, but you'll see significant changes in your land values. It's happening all across Dallas. You know, it's in Dallas County. It's happening everywhere because the older homes, Dallas has been built out. We don't have a lot of new area for growth, especially north of I-30. And so what we're seeing is gentrification, homes being torn down, new ones being built. But again, we're not going to use those, you know, the new custom homes being built to estimate what your house would sell at the ranch style house built in 1960. We're going to look at what the ranch style houses are selling for. And what y'all need to do is, like, I'd like to tell people all the time is, you should be proactive. Every year you should have on your calendar, April 15th. I need to verify the value with the appraisal district. We mail notices April 15th of every year. The earliest the protest deadline in Texas can be is May 15th. You should be April 15th. We don't have to notify you if your value doesn't change, okay, or if the ownership doesn't change. So, you may not get an appraisal notice. Now, we're going to put an appraisal notice and a protest form on every property in Dallas County, April 15th on our website. Most people now are getting appraisal notices, and even though the market value is not changing, because the law back in the late 90s, they created a law that said we can't raise the appraised value of a person's home who has a homestead in place for a period of 1 year by more than 10%. Okay? This is called the capped homestead law. And so what happens is, let's say hypothetically we're in a neighborhood and we have them appraised at $300,000, and all of a sudden we start realizing they're selling for $500,000. We're going to build a model at $500,000, okay? And then we're going to notify you at $500,000, but you're going to have a capped homestead appraised value of $330,000, 10% more than that $300,000. And it'll calculate at 10% a year until it eventually meets the market value. So let's say the homestead at $500,000. That next year, your capped homestead value or your appraised value is going to go to $360, and then it's going to go to $390, and then your exemptions are applied not to the market but to that appraised value, the cap value, and that exemption less becomes your taxable. So a lot of right now we only raised 160,000 homes this year. We lowered 60,000 homes, and that's 220,000. So there's 430,000 homes that market values didn't change, right? But of those, about 70% of them have cap values on them. Last year, when we had 300 of the 420,000 homes that have homesteads on them, 350,000 of them had cap values, or cap value less than the market. Because we saw in Dallas County, we saw unprecedented growth coming out of COVID. We saw properties appreciate at 20%. You know, in my neighborhood, it's almost doubled in value. You know, 6 years ago, homes were selling for 120 a foot. Now they're selling for 220 a foot. We've seen that. We've all seen that. Now, the past year, y'all see it. You see for sale signs up longer, right? You see for sale signs now. Things are flattening out. Market values are really a low single-digit growth right now, but taxable values are growing up because that capped homestead is recalculating at 10% until it meets the market. So a lot of y'all may get notices this year that don't show an increase in market value, but the cap value is recalculated another 10%. If you're over 65, your county taxes are frozen, right? And you have an over 65 exemption. Your school district taxes are frozen, but your college, community college, your Parkland Hospital, or your city aren't. They will continue to calculate based on based on the change in that taxable value, that appraised value, that market value. So, but it is one thing nice. I know I got the city here. I wish the legislators would have a 3% cap. I don't like 10%. I like to see 3%, you know, because it's more manageable, right? But we've seen unbelievable growth. And I revisited, Cheryl and I, we visited recently over 45 of the cities and schools this past 30 days, talking about what's going on with what's happening. But right now, things are slowing down. But we're not going to see a degradation of values in Dallas County. I don't think in my lifetime, okay? And here's why. Everybody wants to be in Dallas County. I mean, all real estate investment trusts, institutional buyers, foreign governments. We have job growth. We have population growth. You know, I read yesterday there's going to be another 4 million people in this area between now and 2050. So we won't. I'm glad things are slowing down. In a perfect world, I would love not to change the value. I would love not to do any reappraisal. But we're going to do those ratio studies, and if we're not appraising property at what they're selling for, we're going to target it for reappraisal. Total value, we're going to come up with a land value. If we have land sales, that's going to be the basis of our land value, and then the residual will be the improvement value. You know, but we never want to overvalue for what you can sell your property for in its current condition as of January 1. You know, and we're appraisers, and we're just trying to be unbiased. We're going to look at data points, and when you come in and you file a protest, we're going to try to find the 3 best comparables. We're going to try to look at your evidence, and we're going to try to come up with the right value. You know, there's no incentive for me. I don't collect your taxes. I don't set your rates. I don't get paid based on how values are changed. I'm out there to create a role that's accurate and timely so our cities and schools can go set rates and collect taxes. You know, I'd love to see rates come down, tax rates. I'm like you, I'd love to see tax rates come down. You know, I know there's legislation right now to up the homestead exemption for school districts from 100 to 140,000. It was 25,000, then it went to 40,000. Now it went last session in Senate Bill 2 in the 88th session in late 23. It went to 100,000. There is stuff out there right now that there's a bill that's probably going to be a constitutional amendment we'll have to vote for in early November to raise the independent school district homestead exemption from 100,000 to 140. So, you know, which is good. It's giving everybody tax relief, you know. So that's kind of us in the deal. What I brought over here for y'all, this is the insert. It's up here. This is going to be our appraisal notice that goes out on Monday. Again, they should be in everybody's mailbox by Friday. But you can go to our website April 15th and pull down your appraisal notice, your protest form. The one thing I said too, we prefer you to go on UFile, our online system, okay? Submit your evidence with that opinion of value. After the deadline date, which is May 15th, if you submitted any evidence with your protest form and you haven't been contacted by us through an email or through a phone call, what I would encourage you to do is pick up the phone call after May 15th, and the letter and the phone numbers are here. When you call that number, you'll talk to an appraiser, okay? You call May 15th, it's going to be crazy. Numbers are going to be backed up. After May 15th, pick up the phone and we'll do an informal review with you on the phone. We'll pull your information, we'll look at your evidence, we'll share with you the information we're using, and we'll try to come to some informal agreement, which will negate the need for your formal hearing. So, but between April 15th and May 15th, we're taking so many phone calls and we're processing so much stuff, it's harder for us to do that informal review during that time frame. But we will reach out to you. If you file and submit evidence, and we will reach out to you at least 3 days before your hearing if we don't hear from you, either through an email exchange or through a deal. But I always encourage owners, after May 15th, once you've submitted your evidence and you be proactive and call us up. And when you call that phone, you're going to talk to an appraiser. You know, early in the mornings, you're not going to have long. Our wait times are less than 5 minutes. Sometimes during lunch can be a little bit heavier, but after May 15th, you usually can talk to someone immediately on the phone. So this is the insert that goes in, explains the process, the phone numbers to the residential, commercial, and the business personal property divisions, talks about the informal review process, talks about how the information we're delivering it to you, how you can access it. And the appraiser's there to help you. They'll walk you through how to get your evidence off the website. If some people don't like to be on a computer, if you don't want your evidence sent electronic, then you have to call us up and ask us and we'll mail it to you. Or you can come down and pick it up. Also, anytime, we ask you to submit your evidence at the time you file process, but if you can't, we understand that. You might want to go out and you're waiting to get a repair estimate or talk to a broker. What we'll tell you to do is, once you've filed your protest, you can submit your evidence, either drop it off at the office. We have a drop box right outside our door 24/7. You can mail it to us. Make sure you mail it way in advance of your hearing, or you can send it to an email. It's arbdocs@dcad.org, and that's all out there on these brochures that you can submit electronically after you filed your protest. We're going to look at any evidence you have up until the time of your hearing and at your hearing. Okay? And so the other thing I gave is just this yellow piece is just an overview of the residential valuation process. Goes in a little bit, some detail about what I talked about, how we do what we do. And it also talks about, we go out with the cost model on fair market value, what you can sell it for, and then when we come in during the appeal process, we're going to do a sales comparison approach. There are 3 approaches to value. There's a cost approach, there's a sales comparative market approach, and then there's an income approach. And residential, during the appeal process, we're going to use that market or sales comparison approach when we're working with you informally. Then I also have, for commercial, I don't know if we have any commercial property owners, but here's an overview of how we do commercial valuations. And then also business personal property owners. Here's how we do business personal property. There's a green sheet here. And then also, this is our oversight agency, the Property Tax Assistance Division. They have a form that's called Taxpayer Assistant Pamphlet, just some information about the process, not only the informal process, but what you can do. If you don't agree with the final determination made by your peers, appraisal review board members, most of them are retired. Again, they're not experts. They're going to weigh the evidence. We present our evidence. You all present yours. We rebut. You rebut. They make a decision right there. If you don't agree, you have your administrative evidence. You can file binding arbitration, our arbitrators are a little bit more knowledgeable They have requirements that they have to do. Most of them are realtors, or they're in the financial consultant business or something, or accountants. But if you disagree with the final determination of the ARB, your administrative remedies is to file arbitration within 60 days of the certified letter that you get, or you can file suit in district court. Yeah, we had last year 206,000 protests, of which 160,000 were residential. I think we had 800 binding arbitrations filed. But, I think if you engage and you participate and you provide as evidence, I think, I think we'll hopefully come to some reasonable agreement. Now, the other thing, too, I can't talk to the ARB members. I can't train them. I can't communicate with them, okay? Our legislators don't allow that. It's called ex parte communication. In a way, I wish I could educate them, because sometimes they do things that I don't agree with. I think I could do a better job of letting them know what they need to do and making decisions, but I can't. But the point is those ARB members are going to make a decision there for you. And we're typically doing phone hearings, but if you don't want to do a phone hearing, you just got to ask and come down and do a live hearing. And most people really like the phone hearings, but the thing you got to keep in mind is, because you had one bad experience, and this happens, some people might not have had a great experience, right? 1 year. That shouldn't prevent you from not following up the next year. Every year is different. There's data points that are different. We're going to look at different data points. There are different ARB members. So because you had a bad experience in 1 year, shouldn't preclude you from pursuing the valuation in any given year. Every year, it's as of January 1. Just because you didn't get a notice doesn't mean you can't protest. Just because it didn't get changed the year before doesn't mean it get changed this year, or vice versa. So every year stands on its own. And appraisal is simply defined as an opinion of value, okay? It's subjective, But, appraisers, you give appraisers X number of data points, they're going to come up with 3 different values, but there should be a reasonable range within that value, right? And, but it's an opinion. But that's where, again, we're going to look at what properties are selling for. And you may want to just talk about the land value, but we're here to make sure that we have the right market value, what you can sell it for. We know by lowering your land or lowering your improvement, it's going to lower your value. But we, as appraisers, may not want to lower your value if we think the total value we have is indicative of what you can sell your house for based on the information we have. But it is subjective. So, and then so that's the information I have here. And, we're here. It's going to be very busy. I anticipate over 210,000. I'm going to just touch on something else, okay? And there's y'all listen to the radios. You probably got them. I've got 2 or 3 flyers about tax consultants wanting to represent you for property tax purposes, okay? I'm not going to tell you not to, but I will say this. If you have the time, you know your property better than everybody, right? You have the ability. I would tell you, if you have the time, you should do it yourself. Why pay someone a percentage of tax savings when you can go do this? We'll have an agent firm that'll file 20,000 protests, right? And they'll have 8 people working for them, okay? Do the numbers, okay? So the point is, if you have the time, do it. If you don't want to do it, and what we're seeing is a lot of people are going to tax consultants. We work with them, right? But you know your home, you have your time. Again, really seek out a realtor in your neighborhood. I know, and ask them what a realistic sales price for your house in its current condition, not a list price, not what it would sell for, it's fixed up. And ask them with a few qualifying statements as to why they think that. It's a broker's opinion of value. Well, I listed a house down the street, or I just sold 2 that are comparable to yours, or I sold this one and your house is not in good a condition and therefore it's going to sell for less. And the information that they're giving you and providing are the same information that we're used to try to estimate what you could sell your home for. So does anybody have other questions you want to come up? Just y'all, whoever come up, just line up. So. Okay, sure. Yeah, the homestead exemption. Uh-huh. I'll repeat the question. You want to go in the microphone real quick?
I'll listen to the microphone.
Okay. All right. Can you hear?
Not very loud.
Okay.
Probably talk louder than
All right.
the microphone. I'm short.
Yeah.
So there you go. So homestead exemptions on
Right.
that part. So I'm getting information from like my bank and other areas about every 5 years you're supposed to renew
Right.
or update information from the homestead.
Right. That's a good question.
And then with that, I don't know where that 5 years
Yeah.
is.
Here's what happened. In Senate Bill 2, she asked about exemptions, or homestead exemptions. And there's been a lot of stuff in the news that we're going to audit your exemptions and are you going to have to reapply? And here's what's happened. In the last legislation session, they say appraisal districts have to review a homestead exemption at least every 5 years to determine whether it's valid, okay? And so there's been this big stir across the state, I'm going to have to reapply every 5 years. No, that's not the case. We're required to audit the record at least every 5 years, and if we think there's something unusual about the homestead exemption, we're going to send you a letter and ask you to reapply, okay? Something that's strange, we've been doing this for 20 years. Patricia, we audit the 420,000 homestead exemptions every year, twice a year. We get all the information from the Department of Public Safety, right? What you have to do to have a homestead, you have to live and reside there. You can't have a homestead somewhere else, and you have to have a Texas driver's license where the property address makes the mailing address matches the property address. We've been looking at this. We sent out this year, I think, was it 10,000 letters or reapply letters? And we're targeting ones that we look at the DPS record. They don't have a valid driver's license anymore. The mailing address has changed or something. So y'all, we'll send you a letter. And if you don't reapply, we're going to ask you to reapply in 30 days. We're going to remove it for the next appraisal year. So if you don't, you're going to get an appraisal notice that shows you don't have an exemption. Then you're going to get a tax statement that shows you don't have an exemption. And guess what? If you come to find out you don't react to that letter, you still have a right to go back 2 years and always put on your homestead exemption. If you're over 65, we have to send all that information to you certified mail. Yeah. Yeah, you don't. But the fact is, we're going to send it U.S. mail if you're not over 65. You can always go to our website and look on our website to see if you have an exemption. Okay, when you get your appraisal notice, if the market value and the taxable value are the same, then you don't have a homestead exemption. But on the back of the appraisal notice, it'll show you the exemptions that you have. If you're over 65, we'll say other on our website, not over 65, because we don't want the public to know that you're over 65. So if you see other exemption type on the website, it means you have an over 65. If you're over 65, you're 64 today, and we have your date of birth, we're going to auto grant you over 65. Okay, and what happens when you turn 65? You get your school taxes frozen in that year, and you get the county taxes frozen in that year. Not the value, the taxes. Okay, but you still see increasing tax liabilities from the city, from Parkland Hospital, and Kylant Community College.
And that's what Dallas County did for Farmers Branch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frozen for Dallas County, but
Right.
not for the city.
No, City of Farmers Branch has not frozen over 65 people's taxes. Most cities in Dallas County haven't done it. You know, there are cities that can do it, but it'd be through an ordinance or a vote, and it hasn't happened in Farmers Branch. It hasn't happened in most of the cities in Dallas. So, but the counties are frozen, your school districts are frozen.
So my last question.
What's, here's the deal. If you have a taxable value that's different than the market value of your property, right, you know you have an exemption in place, okay? If you ever get an appraisal notice and it'll show the market value and the taxable value is one and the same, you don't have an exemption, okay? But if you have a market value and the taxable value, and it's on the appraisal notice, it's different, you have an exemption in play, okay? So, but you can go to our website and look. The other thing you can do, you can call our customer service. Ask, they'll pull you up. They'll take you to the website. You can look at our website. Right now, our appraisal staff members, the appraisers, they're going to be on the phone between April 15th and July 25th every day to answer questions. So not sure, call up, go to the website. If we're going to remove your exemption, we have to notify you. We're going to ask you to reapply. If you don't reapply, you're going to get notified 3 times. Actually, you're going to get notified 3 times in 12 months. You're going to get the letter. If you don't respond, you're going to get an appraisal notice that doesn't have an exemption. You're going to get a tax statement. Also, the law requires us, for every homestead that has a mailing address and a residential file the same as the property address, and it doesn't have a homestead exemption, we have to mail you a homestead application every year. So you're going to get notified. If for some reason you're sleeping at the wheel, and unfortunately a lot of people, in some of the news media, Cheryl and I are one, when you get something for appraisal district, look at it. You know, don't just ignore it. Don't ignore it, look at it. But the point is that if for some reason you find out that you didn't reapply and you lost it, you can go back 2 years to get it. And what will happen is we'll add it back, and let's say you paid your taxes without a homestead, you're going to get a refund. So you have 2 years to go back. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Three questions.
Yes, sir.
AI,
Uh-huh,
how and are you all using it?
right,
You can talk about that in a
Okay.
second. Second question, realtors.
uh-huh,
Not knowing specifically the neighborhood that you're
Right.
putting our homes in,
right.
is there a resource where we can go to find realtors that are servicing whatever that neighborhood might be?
Okay,
And the third question is specifically Farmers Branch. We have some specific building codes that we have to follow.
right,
So, for instance, if you enclose your garage,
right,
you have to build another one.
right.
How do those municipal building code requirements
Right.
affect a property value?
Okay, okay, good question. All right, let's start with, I'll do the A and one last. Let's do the realtor. The best realtor is drive your neighborhood and look for the signs. That's the best one. Remax or whoever, Keller Williams, look in your neighborhoods, look at the signs in your neighborhood or the neighborhood. Those are the people who are knowledgeable, okay? That's where you need to look at. They know the neighborhood. They're the ones listing and selling properties. That's my deal. Okay, with regard to us, we want our physical attribute information. If you have an enclosed garage, we're going to notice an enclosed garage. We may value it like the same price per square foot as your home if we think it's of equal quality, but if not, we may value it differently as like a room addition at a lower value. So our information, you should always look to make sure our information is described correctly, that we have a swimming pool if you have it, or if you don't have a swimming pool, you built it, you covered it up or you got rid of it, you want to look. But with regard to it, we get the building permits from the city, so we're going to go out and we're physically going to inspect these properties. And then what we try to do, we don't want to overvalue your house, but when you build a pool or you build a detached garage, what we're trying to estimate is what we call the contributory value of that added improvement. What is that going to contribute to the resale of your property, okay? And what happens is many times, right, the swimming pool, it may cost you $80,000, but we're not going to value it at $80,000 because we don't think that's going to contribute an additional $80,000 to resale of your property. It may be $40,000. But conversely, it could be something where you add a room addition on and you paid $15,000, but you added, let's say 200 square feet, right? And homes are now selling for $150 or $200 a foot, and now it's going to indicate that you're going to get that additional square footage on the resale of your property. It could be higher than what you put in. But these are all issues that you have a right to talk to an appraiser. Now, I did say this, when you're over 65, your school districts get frozen, your counties. With the one exception, if you make added improvements to your home, then they will recalculate that freeze. The added improvement is additional square footage, a swimming pool, okay? It's not remodeling your house, okay? So, but it's what we believe that thing will be with regard to contribute. So we're going to inspect the property. We're not into code compliance. We don't really talk to code compliance. We're just going to receive the building permits, and our appraiser staffs have iPads. They have full access to our records in the field. And when we're driving neighborhoods, we're going to look, we have pictures, we're going to look at what's there. If we see a change, we're going to make a change right there on site. So our goal is to describe your property accurately. And those things that you're adding or doing to your homes, we're trying to estimate how that's going to affect the sale of your property. And then AI. So there's three ways to model property. We do an adaptive cost estimate. What we do, and it's the most common and the most, I guess, simplistic. We're going to look at what homes are selling within that class range, and we're going to adjust our cost tables to reflect what that class of property will sell for in the neighborhood. Then there's linear regression analysis, and then the new thing is AI, predictive modeling. It's all predictive modeling. We design very specific models. Again, 14,000. A lot of assessment offices may have one model for the whole city. We don't do that because we want what you mentioned. We don't want something to bleed over here for here. We want to look at here. So we're not using AI. Very familiar with it. I've worked with some companies, talked with some companies about using it. At this point, we're not because we like how we build our models. We also have to be able to sit down with you and explain to you in common terms how we're valuing your property. And we're going to do it through a sales comparison approach. So AI is not, we could do AI. I mean, there's no question. My board asked me this, and I said, we could do hearings with AI. We could do formal hearings. We could, basically, all we would do is write a script where the computer is presenting the evidence. And then in the rebut, we would just reinforce our evidence. But right now, you have a right to cross-examine, so we have to have an appraiser in the room. And for accountability purposes, we want an appraiser in the room to answer your questions and to do those things. But it's out there, but it's all predictive modeling, so that's kind of it.
So on the website, is there a way for us to determine what neighborhood,
Yeah.
the boundaries that you're using for our?
There's not a map out there. You can look, there's a neighborhood code on the account, okay? And then when we give you the evidence, it's a good question, okay? When you file your protest that next day, okay, he's asking, can I see the neighborhood code? Can I see who's in my neighborhood, okay? When you file your protest, once we flag it, the next day, again, at the website, you go to your account level, it's on the 41461 evidence link. There is something called a neighborhood value review, okay? That neighborhood value review is going to give you every property that's in your neighborhood, the address, the account number, the market value of that property, and any known sales information we have in that neighborhood that occurred over the last 3 years. So that's called the neighborhood value report. It's out there at the time you file your protest. You're going to have access to all the properties within that neighborhood. You're going to be able to see it. Now, it could be, keep in mind, we'll also show the building class, right? Because there could be different building classes, all right? We'll show you the age of the property. It's a neighborhood value review. And then also, you can go through our website. We have every property on our website. But that neighborhood value review will show you where, it's not a map. It just shows you all the properties within your neighborhood. And you can look at the neighborhood street addresses and get an idea of what your boundaries are. So that's out there for y'all at the time you protest. Yes? When you come up? You want to do it first, and then she can come in afterwards? Okay.
Is there a risk of appraised value increasing after protest?
No. In fact, the law, great question, is there a risk of the value changing after you protest? Okay. Actually, when you file a protest, right, there's a law written that the appraisal review, we can't raise it. We would never raise it, okay? And when and we're a little different than other appraisal districts. If we make an offer to you, we're going to adjust that offer, even if you don't agree to it. A lot of appraisal districts won't. If you don't agree to the change, they're going to make you go to hearing without the change. We're going to offer you the change and make the change. But the ARB, the appraisal review by law, cannot raise the value higher than the notified value. So, someone comes in, and all of a sudden the ARB's looking at it. We notified you at $350. They're looking at evidence, so they found out you just bought it for $400,000. They, by law, cannot raise it higher than what we notified you at. So that's by law. So, but every year stands on us, though, that next year the value could change. So, and that we would be doing that. So.
And if we've made any improvements on the property, increasing the value,
Yeah.
is there a way we can verify if that's in the system, if it's
Yeah.
actually pull permits for it?
Sure. What we'll do is if you take out a building permit, right, we have another thing we put out there when you file a protest, okay? The neighborhood value review will show permit activity if you took out a permit. We'll show you what our estimate is. But when you file a protest, we give you screenshots of your record, the ownership screen, the land screen, the physical attribute screen. One is the permit screen, okay? It's a permit, and it is, if any permit's been taken out for that given year, it'll say appraisal year 25, and we'll show you the inspection date, the permit value, and the contributory value that we estimated on what that did with regard to your property.
Is there any additional evidence that's going to be provided in DCAD during the hearing, other beyond that I mentioned on the neighborhood property value?
Yeah, basically what we provide, she's asking, once you file a protest, what evidence is out there? Is there any additional evidence? The evidence that we're going to provide you on our website electronically at your account level with that PIN, under 4142, we're going to give you the neighborhood value review, okay? We're going to give you our protest procedures. We're going to give you a screenshot of your appraisal record of all the screens that we have for that current year. Ownership screen, the land screen, the physical asset screen, the sales screen will show the history of the sales that occur on your property if we have that in our database. The permit information. So it's going to give you that information. That's what you're going to have. And then, what's that? Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. So those, you're going to get your appraisal record, the sales information within your neighborhood, and basically the neighborhood value review. That's the evidence that we're going to provide you. And we're also going to provide you an equity analysis, okay? And typically what we do in our equity analysis, we're going to give you 7 properties in your neighborhood of the same class, okay? And it's going to be a spreadsheet out there. And it's going to adjust for differences, land value differences, it's going to adjust for bath count differences, it's going to adjust for condition differences, and it's going to show you the median appraised value, that middle property. There's 7 properties. It'll show you that middle value. And if that value is less than the market, we're compelled to lower it to that value. But I can tell you the way we build models is we build them based on fair and equitable models. So when we're done with our reappraisal, when we adjust for differences, it's always going to come back to the value of property. But when they don't is when we start overriding values and start lowering them, then it's possible that the adjustments will show something less than what we have you appraised at. But that's the equity evidence that we'll provide for you as well.
Is this provided before an informal hearing?
It's provided at the time you file a protest, so yes. Yes. And what we've changed, and this, y'all been here for a while, you know, we used to have an informal process to have y'all come in before you filed a protest. It became completely unmanageable. It wasn't safe. It wasn't efficient. So what we require y'all to do now, you got to file a protest. You got to submit your evidence. And then we're going to have an informal review process, or informal review after you've done those things. As long as you're providing evidence, putting in value, we're going to sit down and we're going to have a discussion over the phone with you to try to come to some reasonable agreement. You know, if you come in our office and absolutely want to see someone, we'll sit down with you. At the end of the day, we may say, well, you haven't provided any evidence. You need to go to bring your case to the hearing. But we need y'all to participate in the system and bring that evidence forward. And once you do that, we'll have an informal review with you. Okay. Any other questions? Come on up. Yep. Good questions.
I would like for you to please clarify several things
Okay.
about the appraisals and these things such as that. So you made mention of getting building permits.
Right.
Get building permits. Is it or is it not the responsibility of the city to notify you of those building permits? I
They do.
believe
They
it
do.
is.
They do. They do. We pick them up.
The question is, how long do you give them?
Well, what we do every month.
And do they get penalized?
Right.
If they
No.
don't submit those in a timely fashion, and what is a timely fashion?
Here's what we do. There's 31 cities in Dallas County. She's asking about how do we get our building permits. And what we do, we pick up once a month, we receive all the building permits that are issued at each city. That's what we do. We pick those up, we get them, and we go out. That's what we do. So we're not involved in the city, how they issue permits or what they do. We're gonna go and work those. We're gonna pick them up monthly, year round, and we're gonna go out and inspect the property if we believe that permit affects the condition of the property. Now, there are some people that don't take out permits, right? Well, what we're going to do, our appraisers are driving the field, but the best thing we will always tell you to do, if you think there's information that's wrong on our file, anybody's property, you should just email us and ask us to look. Well, you know, it's an anonymous, hey, someone's building something next door to my house, you know, a detached garage. You know, if you send an email to the residential division, we're going to go inspect that property. You know, we don't care whether, I mean, we care, we wish everybody would take out a permit, but at the end of the day, what we care about is not whether who told us or whether a permit was or wasn't did. What do we want? We want our record to be correct. We want to make sure the physical attribute information, the square footage is correct.
That was not actually my question.
Yeah, okay.
The question was, the city has the information.
That's correct.
Is there a time frame, a restriction on how long they have to get that information to you? And if they don't do it in a timely fashion, what would the repercussions be? Well, of course, we're not going to get taxes collected, but do they have to do that in a timely fashion? Because there are those who have asserted that perhaps that has not always been the case.
I'm unaware that the cities are holding back any data for us. So what I would tell you is the incentive to do that, there really wouldn't be a incentive to do that for cities. Because what they want to do, they want to make sure our appraisal roll is accurate, right? And so why would they, if they have new construction permits, why would they not want to provide it? Because they want us to go out and reflect that new home's out there to have the right value on it. So I'm unaware. I've heard all of these rumors over the years. We're picking up the permits that are issued monthly by the cities. Every city's different. Every city's different, you know. And we're going to go out and once we get those building permits, we're going to inspect that property, physically inspect it, if we think that permit is going to affect the property's value.
Please don't misunderstand. I'm not implying that they're withholding
Okay.
on purpose.
Okay.
That's
Right.
ludicrous.
Right.
make no
Okay.
sense. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
is there an expectation of a time frame in which they process that information? Because maybe it's not deliberate, and it certainly
Well,
would benefit the city.
right.
But that is
Yeah.
the question.
I can't, you know, I can tell you this, there is a provision in the code. We have a right to go back 3 years on admitted property, okay? So let's say hypothetically, we didn't get a building permit on a new home, right? We have the right, once we discover that that new home's there, we have a right to go back 3 years and add it to the appraisal roll. So that's with us, that's the tax code. So, but your questions are really, I think, geared towards the city, you know. Every city's different, but our goal every year is to make sure we have an accurate description of your property.
Well, and also to that end is that you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that if you find out later, we've got to go back and pay for that. So there were several things printed
Mm-hmm.
that the city could give you amnesty. And I would like for you to clarify that I don't believe they can
No.
do that.
No, I'm unaware of that. I don't know what you're referring to.
If you'd like me to send it to you,
Yeah,
I will.
I will say this, something
I'm
came up,
just saying,
I will,
the
you know
city-
what?
I'm not saying
No,
that.
I
I'm
will
not
say, I will say this.
implying-
No, I will say this. There was an issue, just real quick, and I'm just going to say that we went back, we did an audit of Farmers Branch building permits, for a 3-year audit here recently, City of Farmers Branch.
Yes.
We came out, we only were missing 2 properties over a 3-year period. And those 2 properties were supplemented for omitted property. We don't know what happened, why we didn't receive the permit, you know, and we don't know why, but we did an audit. We went back and we looked at every permit that had been issued in the city of Farmers Branch since 2021 this year. And through that whole process, there was only 2 properties, you know, and those properties were built just recently, and we went back last year and added them to the roll. So I don't know. I think that, you know, well, this is what's important too. If you see something that's not right, you know, you should contact our agency, even if it's not your property. We're going to follow up because we want everybody that's property to be accurately described.
The city told people that had converted their garages that if they would fess up, that the city had the ability to give them amnesty. And that's what the question is. And I'm not asking you to rule on the city. I understand you don't want to do that. But a city is not able to give you amnesty on not paying your property taxes, correct?
No,
As far as
everybody has to pay their property taxes, yeah.
Right.
That's, if you actually, a lien goes on your property January 1 of every year before the taxes are even issued. So, and, you know, so I'm not in the collection business, but again, we want our property descriptions to be correct, and that's the goal, so. And there's discovery mechanisms, one which is actually the permitting process. There's also our appraisers in the field looking at properties. We have territorial appraisers where they're responsible for the market value of all properties in their specific area, which creates accountability, and they're in these areas every day and making sure the descriptions of properties are accurate, whether people are issuing permits or not.
And also, I would like to commend you, the state as well, as not wanting to pivot to AI and to
Right.
actually do the work. I
Right.
think that's fantastic.
Well, thank you.
It benefits everyone.
Exactly.
So thank you. I know it's more work, but
No,
thank
it's,
you, thank you.
I appreciate it. Okay. Yes.
So, real-life, multifaceted scenario.
Step up so that everybody can hear you.
Real-life, multifaceted scenario.
Uh-huh.
Live in a house 62 years.
Right.
It's my childhood home.
Okay.
Build a new subdivision wall, which is on the property, our property. The other neighbors' portion of their walls are failing.
Okay.
They're going to have to fix their wall
Right.
very soon. The issue was, we built a new wall to
Right.
replace the original wall. And it was $70,000. The day after it was finished, but 4 days before it was to be approved, whatever that word is, by the city, 2 kids racing 85 miles an hour down Josie Lane, spin out of control, hitting another driver who was making a left-hand turn, propelling one of the drivers into our wall. It concussed the wall not once, but twice. The whole wall has to be replaced.
Okay.
Everyone knows who I am.
Okay, well.
So,
yeah.
hold on, let me
Okay,
get
okay.
there. So, what happened a month or 2 before, the prior mayor, who left in disgrace,
Okay.
and the city council at the time had approved a new ordinance that all walls had to have an engineered footing.
Okay.
So we call the engineer out. By the time this new wall will be built, it will be between $120,000 and $150,000. And it is a false inflation because of this ordinance that was put into place that is falsely inflating our property value by the time it's finished. And by the way, Monday was the 2 years.
Okay, well, let me just say this.
So-
This session is to talk about the process. And I'm going to answer your questions, okay? This is to talk about the process, okay? It's not to talk about individual scenarios with regard to you. But I will.
But this is important.
Well, and you can talk to me afterwards with this, okay? So, but I will answer this, okay? The thing you got to keep in mind, 3 things that she brings up, okay? The assessment date's January 1, okay? Your house burns down December 31st, right? It's probably going to have no value January 1 on our value. If it burns down January 2nd, guess what? We're appraising that house as of January 1. So what's there as of January 1 is what's relevant. If you have a hailstorm that comes in on February 15th, destroys your house, it's not relevant. We're appraising it as of January 1. So the assessment date's a very important date to know. You know, if you have a conditional issues prior to January 1, and you repaired it on January 15th, guess what? We want to see those repair estimates. Why? Because of January 1, you hadn't made those repairs. So assessment dates are very important. The other issue I'll say is, if you have issues going around your home that are affecting the desirability of your home, okay? Your neighbor does certain things, it could very well affect the marketability of your home. You should bring that to our attention. It may not be specifically directed at your house, but it could affect the marketability of your home. And, you know, that's where, you know, we'd rather you go talk to a realtor and ask them what a realistic sales price for my house is in its current condition. And then they would say, you know what? In a normal situation, we think your house would sell for this. However, beta, what's happening around you or next to you is causing a diminished return, and it's going to be a problem selling your house. So it's something that we would look at. So assessment date's very important. Specific issues with regard to anything, it's not really, this isn't the forum to do it, but I think those are good points just to reinforce the assessment date's a very important date. You know that. And then know that, you know, if there's things that are affecting your home, it's called environmental obsolescence, economic obsolescence. It's the things around you. You got physical depreciation, right? You have functional depreciation, you have economic obsolescence. It's the things around you that are affecting the value of your house. It could be as simply be backing up to a railroad, you know, or something like that. So those are things that you want to bring to our attention during the informal process. Again, doesn't mean we'll all come to a same conclusion, but it's something that we will consider, and we just got to consider how much we want to weight that in determining the final value of your property. So I think this is about wrapped up here. So appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, yes, sir. One more.
So to clarify the exemption for 65, you keep saying that the school taxes and the county taxes
Frozen.
value are frozen.
Not value.
Actually, the rate.
Your taxes are frozen.
So the value of your house goes up, so does your
No,
taxes go up.
no. What happens is when you're over 65, your school taxes get frozen. Not the value, but your school taxes get frozen.
Rate.
The taxes.
rate.
The taxes. It's not the rate. It's not.
the dollar value
It's
at
your
65.
taxes. It's the dollars that you're paying. The year in which you paid taxes for over 65, that amount stays the same. Your taxes are frozen. Not the tax rate, not the value. Your taxes are frozen for the county and for the school district. Okay? So the city, Parkland Hospital, and community college will continue to increase as the value changes. Now, the college doesn't have a high rate, nor does Parkland Hospital. Your city does, a little bit higher than, a little bit less than schools. Yeah, so, and then also what's happened in some of the over 65, it's good that those who've been, 70 now, when they changed the exemption from 40 to 100,000 for your school, they went back and redid your frozen tax amount. And if it happens again, from 100 to 140, those that already have a frozen school amount, they're going to go back and they're going to change it based on that new increase for you, I think.
Okay, so my next question was classification.
Yes, sir.
Classifications that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Had to do with architectural style.
Right.
What you're descriptions online do not have anything to do with architectural styling. They have to do with bathrooms, bedrooms, such and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you bring that up because I built my house in 16 and I've refused my appraisal every year and gone through the process.
Right.
And I've had a number of different designations. When I built my house, I had an outdoor living space and I had an outhouse,
Right.
which I note I have a backyard patio.
Right.
And I found out the outhouse was actually my balcony.
Right.
And those two added to the value of my house like $25,000 for the first 7 years I lived there. And I finally got them taken off during the reappraisal process last year.
Right.
So there's so much inconsistency in my neighborhood. One year when I protested, I had the appraiser that got online with us had pulled houses from Irving, not even in my neighborhood.
Well, I'd be surprised at that. So I will say this. We have our community relations officer over here. You know, we're going to use sales within your neighborhood and now if there's not sales within your neighborhood, we're going to go to what we call competing neighborhoods. And we're going to look at that competing neighborhood to try to estimate what you could sell. Now, what did I ask all of y'all to do? What you really should do is seek out a realtor who's selling homes in your neighborhood to ask them to give you an opinion of value. And now, there's some home neighborhoods that every house is alike. It's easy. You're talking about homes that could be a lot different in certain neighborhoods, condition, classes. Now, when you mentioned our building classes, a class 14 is a brick veneer house between 1,200 and 1,600 square feet with 2 bathrooms, a kitchen, typically 3 bedrooms. So it's a tract home, okay? We call it a 14. Then you have a 16, which is just a slightly bigger tract home. Then you have a semi-custom home that's an 18. Then you have a custom home that's a 21. Then you have a souped-up custom home that's 24. And within those building classes, we give you a general description of what it typically involves. So, but when you get right back to it, when you look at them, it's an architectural style, you know. So it's kind of, to me, it's a little bit semantics on this part, you know. But what we do is let's just say this. I'm going to just say this. Let's say I say it's a 14 in this neighborhood, but we decide to make it a 16. But what are we doing? We're still only establishing the total value of what they're selling for. So whether it's a 14 or a 16, it's not going to change the total value. It may mean that we have a lower location factor on the improvements for the 16 versus the 14, because our goal is to still hit the total market value of the property. And that's where, quite frankly, you know, I'm not saying it frustrates us, but when owners start wanting to talk only about the components of value of land or improvements, we want to talk about the total market. One of the things I mentioned, I wish we didn't have to do a breakdown of land and improvement in total, but the code tells us we have. But our appraisers are going to always get back to, can you not sell your house for this? Here's why we think you can, or here's what we think it could sell for, and you just got to introduce your evidence, and hopefully we can work it out informally. If we can't, fortunately for y'all, you have the ARB, who are citizens. They're not experts. They're going to listen to the evidence and make a determination. And then even now, if you don't like what that final determination is, if you have a homestead, you can file a binding arbitration for $500. You put on your value of that arbitration what you think the value is. When you go to that arbitrator, if they rule closer to your value, we have to pay that arbitrator. If they rule closer to our value, you have to pay the arbitrator. The state keeps the $50. So the system there's out there, I'm not saying it's perfect, but there are remedies out there. You got to avail yourself. And just because you didn't prevail one year, you did the next. At least this one, they got that information. But that's why it's really important that you look at the description that we have on your property. So, and if it's wrong, you bring it to our attention.
Well, there's just so much inconsistency with the new houses being built in my neighborhood.
Right.
Some of them are 19, some of them are 23.
Right.
And you drive around and the square footages are the same. They have the same bedroom, same bath.
Right.
It makes no sense.
Right. And what I like,
Does the classification have anything to do with the rate of?
It's going to be help determine the total market value of that property. So, and I would say this,
See,
what
that's my problem.
what I would do instead of,
much
for right here, what we like you to do is Patricia, you can give her your card, and then obviously if something happens through the process, you reach out to her. Okay? Thanks. And every year stands on its own. Just remember that. Every year stands on its own, and data points are different. So be proactive.
Thank you for taking my question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. What about, hopefully this is about the process. A property is going through probate. The person received notice from DCAD. 3 notices, I presume, but they still didn't have ownership because probate hadn't made that determination.
Right.
Afterwards, yes, they can then file, but they could have filed it sooner, but now it's too late when the first 3, whatever notices were provided.
Okay. We're going to work legally filed documents with the county, okay? And things through probate, we have to wait till we get a court order to do that. And once we do, we'll reflect our records. On this question, what I'd like you to do is talk to Patricia Nixon about it specifically, because, you know, we work all recorded documents from the county, okay? And that's how we change our ownership. There are folks who pass away and they may not have a will, and it goes through probate, right? So we have to wait till we get the disposition of that probate before we can change our record. And it has to go through a legal process. We just can't change it. We have to go through a legal process. But once it gets changed, we'll correct it. You also always have a right to protest ownership. You know, and if you protest ownership, we're going to tell you why we have the owner, and if it's wrong, we'll fix it, and if it's right, we're going to tell you why, or we're going to tell you what steps you need to do to get that ownership corrected. And it's got to be through basically a court proceeding or through a probate. So, or a legal filing within the Dallas County Clerk's office.
Okay, so so the process, the person could still apply if I followed everything correctly. They'd have, you're saying talk to Patricia.
And let me just, I want to, one thing about that. It's important, and this has happened, our legislators did this for you. There is what we call now an heirship exemption, okay? And this may be talking about something. You have someone who, your grandmother owned it, she didn't have a will, it's going through probate, but her grandson's living and residing in that property. That person now can get a homestead, even though he's not the legal owner of record. It's called an heirship exemption. He has to be an heir living and residing there, and there's some paperwork that our agency will do with regard to getting that exemption put in place. It's got to follow the Texas Property Tax Code, and we actually provide information actually in our inserts about this heirship. And it was for those people, and unfortunately a lot of it's in lower socioeconomic areas where people don't have sophisticated estates and things, and so it allows now in these folks where an heir is living in the property yet they're not the legal owner because there hasn't been a probate finalized, they can actually be eligible for a homestead exemption.
Thank you very
Okay. All right, Mr. Lynn? All right. All right, appreciate it. All right, thanks.